A minute ago, everyone thought the old giants were untouchable. They weren't. What we're seeing right now isn't just a trade dispute or a headline. It's a systems failure. Weak tariffs don't protect industries. They expose them. They create the illusion of safety while the ground underneath collapses. When protection is half-hearted, it doesn't defend innovation. It punishes it. And when a government has to step in and seize control, that's not strength. That's the final emergency brake on a train that ignored every warning sign. This isn't about one company. It's about what happens when legacy systems stop building for the future and start lobbying for the past, when scale replaces speed, when comfort replaces courage. Markets don't care about history, they care about execution. Innovation doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't slow down for politics. It doesn't respond to weak incentives or symbolic tariffs. It responds to pressure, competition, and reality. The countries and companies that win are the ones that build relentlessly. They invest in first principles. They design for resilience, not bailouts. They move fast while others argue about yesterday. This moment should be a wake-up call. You don't save the future by protecting inefficiency. You earn it by out-innovating everyone else. And the future, like always, will not be kind to those who wait. Weak protection fails because it creates a dangerous gap between reality and perception. When tariffs or policy barriers are introduced without conviction, scale, or long-term strategy, they do not strengthen industries. They lull them into complacency. Companies begin to believe they are shielded from competition when, in truth, they are only temporarily insulated from it. This false sense of security discourages urgency, slows innovation, and rewards inefficiency. Instead of forcing adaptation, weak protection delays it, allowing structural problems to grow larger and harder to fix. Half measures are especially damaging in a global economy that moves at extreme speed. Supply chains, capital, talent, and technology respond instantly to incentives. When protection is symbolic rather than decisive, competitors simply route around it. They find alternative markets, new manufacturing bases, or more aggressive pricing strategies. Meanwhile, the protected companies fail to evolve because the pressure that normally drives progress has been softened. By the time the protection collapses or proves ineffective, the gap between them and global leaders has become enormous. There is also a psychological cost. Weak tariffs send mixed signals to both industry and investors. On one hand, they imply that a sector is too fragile to compete on its own. On the other, they fail to provide the certainty needed to justify major reinvestment or restructuring. Companies hesitate to modernize because they don't know whether protection will last. Investors hesitate because they sense political instability rather than economic strength. The result is paralysis at exactly the moment when decisive action is required. Protection without enforcement or long-term planning often shifts focus away from customers and toward policymakers. Instead of asking, how do we build a better product, companies start asking, how do we qualify for relief? This is a subtle but fatal shift. Innovation slows not because talent disappears, but because incentives are misaligned. Engineering, design, and manufacturing excellence are replaced by compliance strategies and lobbying efforts. Over time, this erodes the very capabilities that once made the industry competitive. Another failure of weak protection is that it ignores the underlying reasons competition is winning. Lower costs, faster iteration, better integration, and superior technology are not defeated by paperwork or marginal price barriers. If an industry is losing because it failed to automate, failed to electrify, failed to digitize, or failed to rethink its fundamentals, no tariff can fix that. At best, it buys time. At worst, it wastes it. And time, when misused, compounds losses instead of preventing them. Weak protection also distorts accountability. Management can blame external forces rather than internal decisions. Declining performance is attributed to unfair trade instead of outdated factories, bloated structures, or slow decision-making. This reduces the likelihood of honest self-assessment. Without pressure, there is no urgency to confront hard truths, cut losses, or make bold bets. The organization continues operating as if the environment will eventually return to what it once was, even though that environment no longer exists. In the end, weak protection doesn't fail loudly at first. It fails quietly. It shows up as gradual loss of relevance, shrinking margins, declining talent attraction, and growing dependence on intervention. By the time the failure becomes visible, the industry is no longer behind by years, but by decades. At that point, collapse feels sudden, even though it was engineered slowly through hesitation, compromise, and the belief that minimal defense was enough. Real competitiveness is built, not defended. When protection replaces progress, failure is only delayed, not prevented. When a government steps in to seize control of a major company or industry, it is rarely a sign of confidence or strategic dominance. It is an admission that the system has broken down so severely that normal market mechanisms can no longer keep it alive. Governments do not intervene because things are going well. They intervene because collapse has become unavoidable. By the time public control is considered, the organization has usually exhausted private solutions, lost investor trust, and failed to adapt to changing realities. State intervention often follows a long period of ignored warning signs. Declining productivity, shrinking market share, aging infrastructure, and mounting debt do not appear overnight. They accumulate slowly while leadership delays difficult decisions. Instead of restructuring early, cutting uncompetitive divisions, or reinvesting aggressively, problems are postponed. When the situation finally becomes politically visible, through mass layoffs, supply chain failures, or national economic risk, the government is forced to act, not to innovate, but to stabilize. This type of intervention is fundamentally defensive. The goal is not to create a stronger or more competitive organization, but to prevent immediate damage, job losses, economic shock, or systemic disruption. Emergency control is about containment, not progress. It keeps the lights on, pays the bills, and avoids chaos, but it does not solve the root problems that caused the crisis in the first place. Stability replaces ambition, and survival becomes the metric of success. Once under government control, incentives shift dramatically. Political priorities begin to outweigh operational ones. Decisions are shaped by elections, public opinion, and regional interests rather than efficiency or long-term strategy. Innovation slows because risk becomes unacceptable. Failure, which is a necessary part of progress, is no longer tolerated when public money and political reputations are on the line. As a result, experimentation declines and bold transformation becomes unlikely. Another consequence is the loss of accountability. In a competitive market, poor decisions are punished quickly. Under state control, losses can be absorbed indefinitely, masked by subsidies or emergency funding. This reduces pressure on leadership to perform. When survival is guaranteed, urgency disappears. The organization may continue operating, but it does so without the discipline that competition enforces. Over time, this can entrench the very inefficiencies that led to intervention in the first place. Government takeovers also send a powerful signal to global markets. Investors interpret them as warnings, not reassurances. Capital becomes more cautious, talent looks elsewhere, and partnerships weaken. The perception shifts from opportunity to risk. Even if the intention is to protect national interests, the result is often reduced confidence and long-term disengagement from private stakeholders who are essential for recovery and growth. Perhaps most importantly, state seizure highlights a failure of foresight. It reflects years of policy and corporate decisions that prioritize short-term stability over long-term competitiveness. Instead of building resilient systems capable of adapting to disruption, reliance grew on external support and incremental fixes. When disruption finally arrived, there was no buffer, no flexibility, and no plan. Intervention became the only remaining option. In this way, government control is not a solution, but a symptom. It marks the point at which choice has narrowed and alternatives have vanished. What remains is management of decline rather than construction of a future. The takeover may prevent immediate collapse, but it also confirms that the system was unable to evolve on its own. Legacy systems become the real problem when they start prioritizing preservation over progress. Organizations that once succeeded through scale, experience, and dominance often mistake past success for future security. Over time, the structures that enabled growth harden into constraints. Decision-making slows, risk tolerance drops, and layers of management multiply. What once provided stability begins to suffocate adaptability. The system keeps functioning, but it no longer learns. One of the most damaging traits of legacy organizations is their reliance on historical advantage. Brand recognition, market share, and political influence replace innovation as primary defenses. Instead of competing by building better products or services, they compete by protecting their position. This creates a mindset where change is seen as a threat rather than a necessity. New technologies are treated as disruptions to be resisted instead of opportunities to be embraced. Speed is another casualty. Large, established systems are optimized for predictability, not agility. Every decision requires approval, review, and alignment across multiple departments. By the time action is taken, the market has already moved on. Smaller, faster competitors exploit this delay, iterating rapidly and capturing customer loyalty. Legacy systems respond with incremental updates when radical reinvention is required, widening the gap instead of closing it. Comfort also plays a critical role. When organizations grow large enough, internal incentives often reward stability over performance. Careers are built on maintaining existing processes, not challenging them. Taking bold risks can threaten personal security, while maintaining the status quo feels safe. This leads to a culture where inefficiency is tolerated and mediocrity becomes normalized. Innovation teams may exist, but they are isolated from core decision-making and stripped of real power. Another defining weakness is technological inertia. Legacy infrastructure is expensive, complex, and deeply embedded. Replacing it requires upfront investment, operational disruption, and short-term pain. As a result, outdated systems are patched instead of rebuilt. Over time, these patches accumulate, creating fragile architectures that are costly to maintain and difficult to scale. Competitors built on modern platforms move faster with fewer resources, while legacy systems struggle under their own weight. When pressure increases, legacy organizations often turn outward instead of inward. Rather than confronting internal inefficiencies, they seek external relief through regulation, subsidies, or protectionist policies. Lobbying becomes a strategic tool, not to enable innovation, but to delay competition. This approach may provide temporary breathing room, but it does nothing to improve underlying capabilities. In fact, it reinforces complacency by shifting responsibility away from leadership and execution. Talent dynamics further accelerate decline. High-performing individuals are drawn to environments where impact is visible and progress is fast. Legacy systems, burdened by bureaucracy and slow change, struggle to attract and retain top talent. Younger innovators, in particular, avoid organizations where ideas take years to implement. As talent drains away, the organization becomes even less capable of transformation, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of stagnation. Over time, the gap between legacy systems and modern competitors becomes structural rather than tactical. It is no longer about a single bad decision or missed trend. It is about an entire operating model built for a world that no longer exists. By the time leadership recognizes the scale of the problem, the cost of change feels overwhelming. What remains is a system optimized to survive yesterday, trying unsuccessfully to compete with tomorrow. Markets operate on outcomes, not intentions. They do not reward companies for how long they have existed, how many people they employ, or how important they once were. They respond to results: quality, cost, speed, and reliability. Execution is the only language markets understand. Tradition may buy attention, but it does not buy loyalty. When organizations assume that past success guarantees future relevance, they misunderstand how competition actually works. Execution means turning ideas into reality consistently and at scale. It is not about vision alone, but about the ability to deliver on time, at the right price, and at the expected level of performance. Many legacy organizations are rich in plans, strategies, and presentations, yet poor in follow-through. Layers of approval, internal politics, and risk aversion slow implementation. By the time a product reaches customers, it is often outdated. Markets punish this delay immediately. Tradition can become a liability when it shapes expectations instead of challenging them. Established companies often define themselves by what they have always done, not by what customers currently need. Processes are protected because they are familiar. Products are defended because they are historically profitable. But markets do not care about internal narratives. They care about whether a solution is better than the alternatives available today. If it is not, customers move on without hesitation. Another misconception is that size guarantees resilience. Large organizations assume that scale will protect them from disruption. In reality, scale without agility magnifies failure. When execution is weak, large systems lose faster and more visibly. Costs are higher, reactions are slower, and mistakes are harder to reverse. Smaller competitors can pivot quickly, test new approaches, and abandon failed ideas without catastrophic consequences. Markets favor this adaptability. Execution also determines trust. Customers, partners, and investors all assess credibility based on performance, not promises. Missed deadlines, quality issues, and inconsistent delivery erode confidence. Once trust is lost, reputation offers little protection. Markets remember failure far longer than they respect history. Recovery becomes exponentially harder because every future claim is met with skepticism. There is also a direct link between execution and learning. Organizations that execute well gather real-world feedback quickly. They see what works, what fails, and why. This feedback loop drives improvement. Poor executors operate in theory rather than reality. They rely on assumptions, forecasts, and internal metrics disconnected from customer experience. Markets correct these errors brutally by shifting demand elsewhere. Political influence and symbolic protection cannot substitute for execution. Policies may slow competition temporarily, but they cannot force customers to choose inferior products, nor can they compel global markets to ignore inefficiency. When protection fades or competitors adapt, the underlying weakness is exposed. At that point, tradition offers no defense, only the ability to build, ship, and improve matters. Execution is ultimately about discipline. It requires clarity of priorities, accountability at every level, and a willingness to make hard decisions quickly. Markets reward organizations that focus relentlessly on these fundamentals. They punish those that confuse reputation with relevance. In competitive environments, survival is not determined by who arrived first, but by who performs best right now. Relentless innovation begins with a mindset that treats change as a constant rather than a disruption. The most successful organizations do not wait for crises to force transformation. They assume that every advantage is temporary and every solution can be improved. This mindset drives continuous questioning of assumptions, processes, and products. Instead of asking how to protect what already exists, the focus shifts to how to build what comes next, even if it challenges current success. First principles thinking plays a central role in this approach. Rather than optimizing around inherited constraints, innovators break problems down to their most fundamental truths and rebuild from there. This allows them to escape the limitations of legacy systems and industry norms. When competitors are improving incrementally, first principles builders redesign entirely. This creates leaps in performance, cost reduction, and efficiency that others struggle to match. Resilience is another defining trait of relentless innovators. They design systems that can absorb shocks, adapt to uncertainty, and recover quickly from failure. This resilience does not come from protection or guarantees, but from flexibility. Supply chains are diversified, technologies are modular, and teams are empowered to make decisions quickly. Failure is treated as data, not disaster. Each setback strengthens the system rather than weakening it. Speed compounds advantage. Organizations that move quickly learn faster, iterate more often, and capture opportunities before others even recognize them. Speed is not recklessness, it is the result of clear priorities and minimal friction. Decision-making authority is pushed closer to execution, reducing delays. When mistakes happen, they are corrected rapidly. Over time, this velocity creates an insurmountable gap between those who act and those who hesitate. Relentless innovation also reshapes culture. Talent is attracted to environments where impact is visible and progress is tangible. High performers want to solve hard problems, not maintain outdated systems. Innovative organizations reward ownership, curiosity, and results rather than tenure or conformity. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Strong culture attracts strong talent, which accelerates innovation further. Waiting, by contrast, is an active choice with consequences. Organizations that delay transformation often believe they are being cautious or strategic. In reality, they are surrendering momentum. Markets do not pause while decisions are debated. Competitors do not slow down out of courtesy. Every moment spent waiting is an opportunity for someone else to build, learn, and improve. The cost of inaction grows exponentially over time. Ultimately, the future is not something that arrives evenly for everyone. It is built by those willing to challenge assumptions, move quickly, and accept risk. Relentless innovators shape markets instead of reacting to them. Those who hesitate find themselves adapting to rules they did not set, competing in spaces they did not choose, and chasing leaders they can no longer catch.